She wasn't speeding. She wasn't swerving. She wasn't doing anything wrong, just a black woman behind the wheel of a sleek black car, headed to court to defend someone else's freedom. 5 minutes from her destination. 5 minutes from closing another case. But that night the system decided she was the case. The sirens came like a scream in the silence, piercing, deliberate, undeniable. In her rearview mirror, blue and red lights bled across her face. Her stomach clenched, not in fear but in fury, because she knew what this was. It wasn't law enforcement. It was profiling dressed in a uniform. She pulled over slowly, hands in plain sight. Calm. Measured. But beneath that calm was a woman who had had enough. Enough of being treated like a suspect in her own skin. Enough of watching the law twisted against the very people it promised to protect. He didn't ask questions. He didn't explain. He pulled her from the car, slammed her onto the pavement, and cuffed her like she was disposable. Just another body to control. Another voice to silence. But what Officer Darren Cole didn't realize was that Danielle Price wasn't just anybody. She was the storm. And with one silent tap on her phone, she'd already triggered a reckoning. One that would burn through courtrooms, precincts, and headlines. A reckoning that would drag every lie, every cover-up, and every unchecked abuse of power into the light. He thought he was making an arrest. He was digging his own grave. Because justice doesn't always come with a gavel. Sometimes it comes with bruises, silence, and a single devastating phone call. If that opening shook you, if you believe in truth, justice, and the unbreakable spirit of those who rise against the system, then this is your channel. Subscribe to Chronicles of Black Resilience, hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that matters, and drop a comment to share your thoughts with us. Have you ever been underestimated and you fought back? Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. She wasn't speeding. Her taillights worked just fine. And the music wasn't loud enough to bother a soul. Still, the shriek of the siren behind her sliced through the air like a blade through silk. It wasn't just a stop. It was a warning, one she had lived through too many times to misread. Driver, hands where I can see them. That voice. Commanding. Cold. Dripping with the authority of someone who had never been questioned. Officer Darren Cole, known to locals not for his badge but for the shadow he cast. He was the kind of man who turned protocol into intimidation and routine stops into nightmares. If you were black. Danielle Price tightened her grip on the steering wheel, taking a deep breath. 33, Harvard Law graduate, and one of the most promising civil rights attorneys in Atlanta. But here, under the blue and red glow of squad car lights, she was just another suspicious woman in a luxury vehicle. She knew how this played out. She'd seen it in court cases. Read it in headlines. Argued it before judges. The irony wasn't lost on her. Officer Cole approached slowly, hand grazing his holstered weapon. He wore his racism like a badge of honor, and Danielle could see the smirk under his mustache before he even said a word. License and registration. Danielle complied without hesitation. Was there a reason I was pulled over, officer? Cole scoffed. You fit the description. It was a line she'd heard before, so vague it could apply to anyone. Black woman in a nice car was the only description needed in his mind. She handed him her ID, calm but sharp. Danielle Price. Attorney at Price and Bowen Civil Rights Firm. Is this stop being recorded? His eyes flickered, but only for a moment. Out of the car. Now. Danielle's stomach dropped. She could argue. She could assert her rights. But she also knew how that often ended. Instead, she reached for her phone and hit one button on her home screen before placing it back on the dashboard. It was a speed dial, a safeguard. One call. That's all it would take. Cole yanked open her door, dragging her out roughly. You think your little degrees in high-rise address scare me? He spat. You people always think you're above the law. She hit the pavement hard, chin scraping asphalt. Blood. Suck. Anger. But she said nothing. She didn't scream. She didn't resist. The handcuffs bit into her wrists as the officer pushed her into the squad car like a sack of garbage. Back inside the car, Danielle's phone screen still glowed. The call was live. 15 minutes earlier in Midtown Atlanta. In a penthouse office filled with law books and African masks, a phone rang once, then went to speaker. She hit it, said a voice. Elijah Bowen, Danielle's law partner and close friend, stood up immediately. Track her location. Call the press. Call everyone. She finally hit the panic line. They had designed it together, a legal countermeasure for moments like this. One call that would activate a chain reaction. live tracking, cloud uploads of audio and video, alerts to civil rights watchdogs, and most importantly, a call to someone powerful enough to move mountains. Elijah made one more call. This is Elijah Bowen. Officer Darren Cole has just detained attorney Danielle Price unlawfully. She was en route to the Georgia Court of Appeals. We have live footage. I'm activating Protocol 7. Back at the squad car, Cole was smug as he drove, mumbling something about uppity liberals. Danielle sat in silence, her cheek bleeding, the cold steel of the handcuffs pressing into her skin. Her eyes, however, were not afraid. They were calculating. You have no idea what you've just done, she said quietly. Cole glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Oh, I know exactly what I've done. But he didn't. 10 minutes later at APD South Precinct, the squad car pulled in. Officers milled about lazily, until a black SUV with tinted windows screeched to a halt just outside. Two women stepped out, one in a navy blue pantsuit with a gold Department of Justice badge around her neck. The other, a local journalist with a full camera crew. Is that her? The Department of Justice official asked, pointing to the back seat. Yeah, said Elijah, emerging from another vehicle. And the footage is already on Twitter. 2,000 retweets and counting. Danielle sat calmly in the back, bruised but composed. Within minutes, internal affairs descended. The press swarmed. Officers shifted nervously. And Officer Cole? He finally saw her name on the ID again. Danielle Price. Not just some black woman. One of the architects behind several class action lawsuits against systemic police abuse. The phone call had done its job. But Danielle hadn't finished yet. Inside the station, Danielle was uncuffed and seated in a holding room, sipping water. Officer Cole stormed in, only to be blocked by two internal affairs agents. This isn't over, he growled. You're right, Danielle said, finally standing up. Her voice echoed like a hammer. It's just beginning. She turned to one of the agents. I want to file formal charges. Assault. False arrest. Civil rights violation under Federal Statute 42 U.S.C. Section 1983. The agents nodded. Behind them, Cole paled as the weight of what he'd done settled in. The woman he had dragged and humiliated had not only outsmarted him, she had weaponized the very system he thought he controlled. As Danielle walked out of the precinct, her phone buzzed with an anonymous message. You stirred the nest. Be careful who you bring down. Not all enemies wear uniforms. She looked up, eyes narrowing at a dark SUV parked across the street. This wasn't just about Officer Cole anymore. It was about a system that didn't want to be exposed. And she was going to burn it down, brick by brick. The chain reaction, Danielle Price stood on the steps of the police precinct, a bruise forming along her jawline and her heart beating like a war drum in her chest. The message lingered on her phone screen. You stirred the nest. Be careful who you bring down. Not all enemies wear uniforms. She looked up. That black SUV across the street hadn't moved. Windows tinted. Engine running. Watching. Waiting. Elijah stepped beside her, his hand already on her shoulder. That wasn't just about Officer Cole. Someone higher is nervous. Danielle nodded, her voice steady. Good. That means they know what's coming. 2 days later at Price and Bowen civil rights firm in Atlanta, the office buzzed like a hive. Phones ringing. Legal briefs flying between hands. Danielle and Elijah had filed the formal lawsuit not just against Officer Cole, but against the city, citing a pattern of racial profiling, abuse of power, and systemic negligence. Civil rights groups lined up in support. The ACLU offered co-counsel. MSNBC wanted an interview. A federal judge issued an emergency hearing. But something didn't sit right. Danielle's office had been broken into the night before. Nothing stolen. Just disturbed. Papers shuffled. A file missing. A silent warning. She paced her office, phone pressed to her ear. We need surveillance footage from every precinct. I want to know who has access to Officer Cole's personnel file. You think they're going to bury it? Elijah asked. I think they already have, Danielle replied. Later that night in downtown Atlanta, Danielle walked alone toward her car after a late-night strategy meeting. Her heels clicked rhythmically against the concrete, but another sound echoed behind her, a second pair of steps. Slower. Heavier. She quickened her pace. Miss Price, a deep voice called. She turned, her hand instinctively reaching for the pepper spray in her bag. A man in a black windbreaker stepped into view. Older. Weathered. Not threatening but watchful. I used to work at Internal Affairs, he said. Retired now. My name's Luther. You don't know me but I know them. What you're doing is going to rattle some powerful cages. Then help me, Danielle said without pause. Luther handed her a USB drive. Start with this. And don't trust anyone wearing a badge, even the ones who say they're on your side. That night, back at the firm, Danielle plugged the drive into her encrypted laptop. Elijah leaned over her shoulder as the screen filled with grainy footage. The date stamp was 6 months old. The video showed Officer Cole and 2 other high-ranking officials in a dimly lit interrogation room. A young black man, handcuffed, bleeding, was seated, barely conscious. Cole leaned in. You're going to say what we told you to say, or no one's going to find your body. Danielle covered her mouth in horror. This wasn't about her arrest anymore. This was a cover-up that stretched further than she imagined. 3 days later, Danielle stood before a crowd of reporters with the Capitol building looming behind her. We are not dealing with a rogue officer, she said into the microphone. We are confronting a network. A culture of silence and corruption that is protected by rank and fear. But fear doesn't work on me. Not anymore. She dropped the bombshell, the footage from Luther's drive, now authenticated and handed to federal investigators. The press erupted. Microphones shoved closer. Questions hurled. Miss Price, are you concerned about your safety? Danielle smiled, blood still visible on her knuckles from where she had punched through a wall in frustration the night before. I'm concerned for anyone who thinks this system can't be dismantled. Within a week, Officer Cole was arrested. Not just for Danielle's assault, but for multiple civil rights violations. 3 precinct captains were placed under investigation. The mayor's office released a statement of deep concern, but Danielle knew better than to trust politicians scrambling for re-election. Still, justice, however partial, had begun its march. But the real revelation came in an unexpected email with a subject line, "You don't know me, but my brother was the boy in that video. He disappeared. We never got answers. Thank you." Danielle stared at the message, tears stinging her eyes. All the bruises, the threats, the late nights, it was worth it. At the courtroom, Danielle entered with her head held high. The bench was packed. Her lawsuit against the city had become a landmark case, drawing national attention. As she walked past the defense table, a familiar figure stood and faced her. Officer Cole, now in a cheap suit, stripped of his badge, eyes downcast. He mouthed, "You ruined me." Danielle didn't break stride. She replied coldly, "You did that to yourself." She took her place, unfolding her notes as the judge entered. In a world where power often protects the guilty and silences the brave, Danielle Price didn't just survive. She fought back and she won. Not with rage. Not with vengeance. But with truth, persistence, and the unshakable belief that no one is above accountability. Because justice isn't given. It's demanded. It's built. It's fought for, case by case, name by name. Do you believe justice is worth the sacrifice? Have you ever stood up against the system, even when it felt like it was impossible? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of Black resilience that will inspire and challenge everything you know. This is Chronicles of Black Resilience, where truth meets courage. The reckoning 3 months later in the U.S. District Court in Atlanta. The courtroom was silent, oppressively so. You could hear the shuffle of legal pads, the creak of leather chairs, the hum of fluorescent lights above. But all eyes were on Danielle Price. She stood at the plaintiff's table, composed, resolute, dressed in all black. Before her sat the defendant, former Officer Darren Cole, once feared, now fallen. His badge revoked. His pension frozen. His past, exposed in sharp, unforgiving detail for all to see. But this was no longer just about a traffic stop. It was about the entire system that had allowed him to operate unchecked for nearly 15 years. Danielle had turned a personal attack into a civil rights reckoning. Inside the trial, witness after witness took the stand. Former officers, community members, victims. Each testified to the same pattern of abuse, neglect, cover-up, and racial targeting. Danielle's legal team, backed by federal investigators, laid bare the internal memos, the ignored complaints, and the unpunished assaults. One moment stunned the courtroom. A subpoenaed precinct logbook revealed Officer Cole had filed 86 traffic stops of black drivers over 6 months, and only 4 of white drivers. The numbers didn't lie, and neither did the victims. But Danielle wasn't interested in just punishing Darren Cole. That would have been too easy. No, she wanted to set a precedent. When the judge asked what damages she sought, Danielle stood and made her final statement. "Your Honor, we are not here to simply collect money or declare guilt. We are here to dismantle a culture. I request not only financial restitution but a federal mandate. Immediate review of all arrests made by the defendant over the past decade. A mandatory body cam usage enforced by independent audit. A civilian oversight board made up of the communities most impacted. And that this officer, Darren Cole, be permanently barred from law enforcement and placed on the National Registry for Decertified Officers. The room exploded with gasps. The defense objected. But the judge leaned forward and asked only one thing. Can you support these demands with precedent? Danielle replied, I'm about to create one. The verdict, when the gavel struck, the courtroom held its breath. We find in favor of the plaintiff, Danielle Price, on all counts. The ruling sent shockwaves through the city and across the country. Cole was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for civil rights violations. His face was plastered across the evening news, not as a public servant but as a disgrace. But the story didn't end there. 1 year later on the streets of Atlanta, the newly formed Civilian Oversight and Accountability Board now sat just a few blocks from where Danielle was arrested. They had already reviewed over 300 misconduct cases and overturned 27 wrongful arrests. Danielle passed the building on her way to speak at a community event. A young girl, no more than 10, tugged on her sleeve. Are you the lawyer who made the bad cop go away? Danielle knelt to the girl's level and smiled. I didn't make him go away. I just made sure he couldn't hurt anyone else again. A quiet consequence in a cold, gray prison 2 states over, Darren Cole sat alone in his bunk. No more guns. No more badges. No more power. The guards didn't show him favor. Other inmates didn't offer him respect. He watched Danielle on TV sometimes, her speeches, her work, the awards she now received for her activism. And with every broadcast, a piece of the pride he once weaponized slowly disintegrated. His name would never carry honor again. Danielle had taken more than his badge. She had taken his legacy. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it builds slowly, quietly, case by case, person by person, until it cracks the walls of institutions thought untouchable. Danielle didn't win because she fought harder. She won because she endured longer. Because she believed in a world where a black woman doesn't have to bleed on a pavement to be believed. And because she refused to be silent. Do you believe justice is worth the sacrifice? Have you ever stood up against the system, even when it felt like it was impossible? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of Black resilience that will inspire and challenge everything you know. This is Chronicles of Black Resilience, where we don't just tell stories. We build legacies.